So much has been said about the multi-billion dollars Dangote petrochemical refinery that was commissioned in the final days of the President Buhari's administration last month. So let's dig now into the local content aspect of that mega project located here in Lagos. Chatting with me on this now is the man at the head of the local content development and monitoring in Nigeria, Engineer Simbi Wabote. He's the executive secretary of the NCDMB. Great having you live here in the studio tonight, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it.
It's been a while. I passed through this place.
we appreciate that. Of course, you've got the NCDBM programming run on a rise, and we appreciate that, showcasing the footsteps, things that are happening within the industry. That's all part of informing the public and letting the Nigerian public know exactly what's going on within that space, which is very, very, very critical. And that's well appreciated. But let's talk about this, Dangote. What do you make of the commissioning? We haven't talked since then.
Yeah, we've not. I was there. I visited the Dangote Refinery more than 4 times during the construction phase. And the other day, we were all glued to our TV when we were talking about somebody winning an award in the Guinness Book of Records for cooking. I thought by now, as a country, we'll be discussing the Guinness Book of Records for the largest single-train refinery in the world. So I think that perhaps, to me, from the local content perspective, is one of the greatest achievements we have been able to accomplish in Nigeria. I don't know if you visited that place. When you look at the refinery and the petrochemical complex, the fertilizer plant, it's a huge industry on its own.
It's like an industrial city.
It is an industrial city. Like, you know, the size is about 7 times the size of Victoria Island, putting it in context. If you look at the power generation required to run that entire facility, it could power about 4 states if you put them together. You're talking about almost 500 megawatts of electricity, as it were. Then you talk about the utilities, and you talk about the jetty that was built, the quay. You have about 6 quays in that facility. It's a huge mega project.
For massive exports.
It is unbelievable. And I advise anybody who wants to see that feat that has been done by a single individual to please visit that facility. During the construction phase, like you know, from the local content standpoint, we had about 55,000 people working in that facility. There aren't too many projects where you have that number of people on a particular project site. The one I can remember was in my days in the Middle East. That's the GTL, the Qatar GTL. In that construction, we had about 45,000 people on site working. This was 55,000 people on site. And you can imagine the number of Nigerians that were involved in that project. That project, in terms of local content dimension, had the biggest quarry that was established in this country to supply granite. And I see those trucks back and forth, and I see Nigerians driving those trucks back and forth to supply the required quarry to granite to the site. I also see the sand supply that was required. At some point, the community itself, all adjoining communities, couldn't meet 10% of the sand requirement for the construction.
In Lekki
the Lekki axis and beyond. People were all coming, bringing sand, doing all. We had the biggest dredger, the 3rd biggest dredger in the world, situated in that site, dredging sand, raising the height of the construction site by about 1.5 meters to take care of any tidal waves and the rest of it. So it was a massive construction effort. And the number of Nigerians involved, almost about 200 Nigerian contractors were part of the construction. Directly and indirectly, you had about 400 connected to it. So it's one of the local content success stories that we can continue to talk about in this country. Not too many people saw it. If you had visited that site, I used to go on a monitoring visit to the Dangote refinery site, and I saw the number of people working. You see them in the morning when they close, and then you tell yourself, this is what we need in this country. So in terms of local content, it is one of the singular projects. Even like you know, we are doing Train 7 today in Bonny Island. the number of people that worked on Dangote Refinery site compared to what we have in Borno is perhaps 10% of what we have at the Dangote Refinery site during construction. And in this operational phase, you have about 2,000 employees directly that will manage it. I must tell you, if only Nigeria is able to replicate 2-3 of this type of mega projects, then the discussion will be different in terms of youth unemployment, in terms of foreign exchange earning. If Dangote Refinery becomes operational, you are looking at about 21 billion year-on-year foreign exchange coming into the country. The size of that refinery is able to meet, if we get the quantity we consume in terms of PMS in this country. I'm not too sure that we have our hands around the numbers, but 53 million liters per day is more than enough to service us and beyond the shores of Nigeria. So if you line up the direct, indirect, and the induced effect with regards to local content development, that is a project that deserves...
While the project, the refinery, was in the making, what were your thoughts around local content? Do you think we'll be able to meet that? Because you need both skilled and not so skilled human resource for that particular refinery. What were your thoughts?
My thoughts were, we worked hand in glove with the project team in Dangote Refinery. We had a very clear view of the projected number of staff during the construction. We had a clear view of the projected number of staff during the operations phase and all of that. And there were lots of trainings that were carried out during the construction phase on upskilling the skill level of Nigerians, where you have skill, semi-skill, and the rest of them. So we had a very clear view on what we felt Dangote should achieve. Don't forget, application of the Local Content Act is based on a pragmatic approach. Okay. Like, we've had refineries in this country. A lot of them were not working. So even the skill with which you need to run a refinery, we could not even poach people to say, you come out of where you are to come and join to. So we had to start training people afresh. Almost 900 engineers were sent out of the country to acquire the desired skills with a view to bringing them back to start the operations at the end of July, as said by Aliko himself. So I was not disturbed because I know that there were plans to skill up. There were plans during the mid-construction phase, how we will bring those people we have trained to be part of it. And there were plans to look at the operational phase, where we will get Nigerians. But you know how this thing works. Normally in local content, it's not a carte blanche as to say, hey, from day one, you're going to have all Nigerians manning the facility. No, that's not the idea, because there will be transfer of knowledge and the rest. So you have a very clear program on how to phase out the experts that you might bring to start the operations of the refinery. Within a window of 5 years, I can assure you that 99% of those that will man that refinery will be Nigerians. And that plan is within our purview, and we'll be working that with the Dangote Group.
Well, that's on the side of the human resource. What about equipment that you need, fabrications and all of that? Where are we on that?
Well, at the construction phase, there was loads of fabrication. Most of it were done in country. Some of it were done outside the country. Take for instance the catalytic cracker, which is a huge single train cracker. Of course, that was done outside the country because we don't have the technology for it. But fabrication, the bulk of it on site, were done by Nigerians. And the other bit is that the spin-off effect of having a refinery, a petrochemical plant, and a fertilizer plant, I can assure you that within a couple of years, within that Lekki axis, you're going to have the establishment of various other companies that will take some of the byproducts that will come out of the refinery, like the polypropylene, which of course this facility has about 900 kiloton per annum production of polypropylene. And this is what you use for your medical equipment, yes. Medical things like syringes, your plastics, and the rest of it all. This is the chemical you need. Even today, you are talking about LPG cylinders. you need a bulk of the polypropylene to be able to manufacture those. So the spin-off effect in terms of industry is just humongous. That's why I said when I started, I said by now the discussion should be around having a Guinness Book of World Record of the biggest single train refinery in the world.
He's going to go into that, I'm sure. He's going to go into that, and there's no way escaping that. So if you look at the human resource, and I go back very quickly to that, so in a manner of speaking, with Dangote Refinery in full operations, you're looking at the kind of human resource that could manage over the last 5 more years, and that's spinning off into the rest of the downstream industry in Nigeria. Do you think that will happen?
Oh, obviously it will. I mean, if you have, when it comes into operation, the refinery itself, remember, I'm not talking about the fertilizer plant, I'm not talking about the petrochemical plant. Refinery itself will employ almost about 2,000 Nigerians, yeah? And like I said, training has been ongoing. I'm aware of about 900 Nigerians that are spread across the world being trained for this refinery. And I'm sure they begin to trickle in since we did the commissioning. And there is a clear plan. Of course, like you know, the government is working to see how the moribund refineries are brought back into operations. And I believe that some of the capacity that will be built within the Dangote refinery could be deployed to also support those other refineries when they come alive, because
instead of bringing those folks from abroad,
absolutely
you could
not.
Just say, "Oh, Dangote, could you please
absolutely
loan us a couple of guys, hands from there?"
That's what it is. You might talk to, because look, I believe in a private sector driven economy as a person, and what one single individual has been able to accomplish. Imagine if we had allowed Dangote to take possession of the 2 refineries towards the tail end of the administration of Obasanjo. Today we're singing a different song, yeah, because it's a private sector driven initiative. But that didn't happen, which then spurred the man to say, hey, look here, let me build my own. And today it is what it is in terms of the establishment of refining capacity. Because if you look at the entire West African sub-region, you could count 1 or 2 refineries, mini refineries that do exist, but this is humongous. And I don't think if Dangote starts operation, we are going to need any petroleum product import within the sub-Saharan sub-region. That is huge. That establishes us as the giant of Africa that we have always said. And everybody will be having that conversation on a daily basis that, hey, you want refined petroleum product, go to Nigeria, nowhere else.
Oh, well, perhaps you want to build something around the corner, it's going to come to Nigeria. So do you think we should perhaps use the Dangote refinery to have the right training institute for petroleum engineers in terms of refineries?
Probably not petroleum engineers. Petroleum engineers are mainly needed in the upstream sector, but within the Dangote refinery, you have chemical engineers and instrumentation engineers and all other aspects of engineering. In terms of engineers, we don't lack them, to be honest with you, but to be honest, we've not been able to have something like this to expose most of the chemical engineers and the instrumentation engineers that will eventually run Dangote. Today, I believe when Dangote Refinery starts operating, all those folks in the university who read chemical engineering, instrumentation, and the rest will be happy that there's somewhere for them to go and practice. Because apart from that, if you have any idea you want to be part of a refining system, it doesn't exist in the country till today. We as NCDMB, we tried on our own part to say we need to catalyze the development of mini refineries in order to support the process. So we started the modular refineries as a model. I mean, as an organization, we were the first to step in to take an equity position in those people who wanted to establish a modular refinery. And I'm sure NNPC followed later to take equity within the Dangote refinery. Today, we have one that is operating in Ibigwe in Imo State. It's a 5,000 barrel modular refinery.
For diesel?
For diesel, kero, as well as heavy fuel oil, HFO, as well as naphtha is what we produce. The only thing we don't produce in that refinery is PMS. But today, Dangote refinery has capacity for 2 million liters a day. I don't think we have the consumption power to finish 2 million liters a day. So there's potential to export to other parts of the sub-region, as it were. So if you had asked me on how we will deal with this refining challenge that we have had in the past, is for government to catalyze it, for private sector to run it, which we had an example with the Walter Smith refinery. Today, Walter Smith do not even store refined product in their tank, because as you produce, it's being taken away by off-takers. So it's been a success as far as I'm concerned. There are others that we are involved in that are coming up gradually. But this, for me, is the ultimate in terms of construction. As a civil engineer myself, when I visited Dangote Refinery and I saw the construction activity that was going on there, I was marveled. In a situation where they had to buy almost 2,000 set of equipment, trucks, you name them. At a time, they were piling almost 700 piles a day at that site, because you have almost about 177 tanks within that place, and every module, every structure has to be on par. Dangote had to procure it, because within the Nigerian market, you couldn't even get those piles. So if you go there and you see when they close from work, and you see the droves of workers going back to their camp, you get impressed and you tell yourself, why haven't we done this as a country for some time
10, 20, 30 years ago.
And I think part of it was that Aliko himself was also motivated by the local content requirements, that this has to be done, such investment has to be protected, because the local content law is all about protecting in-country investment. So he also saw that, took advantage of it. So we've been working hand in glove, and it's been an accelerating experience.
I'm sure at some point, Engineer Wabote, I'm sure at some point you'll be able to put naira and dollar figures to the local content part of the Dangote refinery.
Yes, of course. We are working that. The numbers are not clear, but I can tell you in terms of in-country spend, you're looking at about 40% of the total spend within the refinery. We had about 40% of it was domiciled in-country. Yeah, in terms of nairas and dollars. And if you say the refinery is about $19 billion, you take 40% of that. That was actually in country, because all the granites you needed on that site came out of Nigeria. They didn't import it.
The sand.
All the sand that you needed on that site came out of Nigeria. All the cement you needed on that site came out of Nigeria. The greater percentage of the reinforcement bars, because like you know, we do produce some element of steel in the country. It's not the heavy sections and stanchions, but all the reinforcement bars that were needed, majority of it was procured in country. So even the electrical cables, yeah, because like you know, today we have a Coleman cable and the rest of most of it were procured in country. So 40% of the total spend was domiciled in country. I can tell you that for sure.
Interesting, as we begin to look at the local content environment so far in 2023. Give me, you're up to date. Bring me up to speed since January started. Where have you been up to?
We have, as an organization, we've sat back. We've looked at, only last week we had a strategy session as a team to look at where we've come from since it was established, and then what's our priority, what's our strategy for 2023 and beyond. We had to take a look at that, looking at a 10-year strategic roadmap. For us, we also have to be in the discussion of the energy transition as a regulatory agency.
We're in a transition right now with the full subsidy removal.
That for me, Boston, I will tell you, is the right decision with regards to the fuel subsidy removal. Fuel subsidy, we all know, is not sustainable. And if you look at the definition of sustainability, you will clearly agree with me that it is not something we should have been carrying on for this long. Why you did not see most individuals or companies, private sector, investing in any refinery in the past is as a result of the fuel subsidy. A private company cannot establish a refinery and then produce the byproduct, and then you begin to fly back and forth Abuja to get the subsidy that you desire haven't dispensed. So it couldn't happen for a very long time. All the IOCs couldn't invest in any form of refining in country because of this subsidy discussion. And over time, it has become a serious issue that needed to be dealt with. And you cannot deal with subsidy by keep talking. Somebody has to take a decision. But my position is that I know I can understand where labor is coming from to a large extent because, I mean, if you have to carry out the subsidy removal, what have you got on the table? And I know the government has been speaking to them. If I were in labor, it's to be very clear to say, yes, in the past we've done this. We've raised the price of PMS in order to reduce the effect of subsidy. The question is, what have we done with all that money that we got out of that incremental process? For me, if I were in labor, is to say, guys, whatever it is, in all this discussion, you are telling us that in a year you're going to spend 7 trillion on subsidy. Let us have a basket or a list of where activities or projects where you will deploy that 7 trillion naira that you're saving out of it. And let us establish a process where we can follow all that you have said you will do with this 7 trillion. Labor being part of it, civil society being part of it, to monitor how the government will expend this money. Because the mutual suspicion that you see between civil society, labor, and the rest of Nigeria is that if you let this go, what will happen to the so-called 7 trillion? Not too many people realize what 7 trillion is. I mean, in your program, you were talking about Ghana wanting to borrow 1 billion and the conditions that they are giving them.
Yes.
Imagine 7 trillion, how many billion that is what we are spending on fuel subsidy. It's not sustainable by any standards.
This is a very exciting conversation with you. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you.
And this is for your weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's nice having you here. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And that's Engineer Simbi Wabote, the Executive Secretary and CEO at the Nigerian Content Development and Monetary Board.